Imagine a country known for its historic charm, cultural diversity, and global influence. But beneath the surface, things are falling apart. From skyrocketing living costs to safety concerns, many Brits feel trapped in a system that's failing them. Why has living in the UK become so unbearable? Stick around as we uncover 11 shocking reasons that are driving people to the brink. 1. Housing costs. The unaffordable dream. The UK's housing market is in crisis. Renting has become unsustainable for many, with London seeing rent increases of 54% over the past 5 years. Commuters in Manchester and Birmingham also face rising rents, forcing people to spend hours traveling just to save on housing costs. Buying a home is no better. The average first-time buyer now needs an income of $86,600, more than double the national average salary. Even high earners in the top 5% struggle to afford homes, with many settling for properties far below their needs. This crisis doesn't just affect individuals, it's fracturing communities. Young people are delaying moving out. Couples are postponing starting families, and older generations are unable to downsize due to lack of affordable options. Meanwhile, property developers focus on luxury housing, leaving average citizens behind. The UK government has promised solutions, but progress is slow. With demand far outpacing supply, the dream of homeownership feels out of reach for millions. For many, the UK is no longer a place to put down roots. It's a place to survive. 2. The cost of living crisis, a daily struggle. The UK is in the grip of a cost of living crisis that's squeezing households across the country. Essential expenses like food, energy, and transportation have soared, leaving families with little to no disposable income. Inflation has hit record highs, pushing up prices faster than wages can keep up. Energy bills, in particular, have become unbearable. The average household saw a 54% increase in energy costs in 2022, with further hikes in 2024. Many families now choose between heating their homes and putting food on the table. Even simple grocery shopping has turned into a challenge, with staples like milk, bread, and eggs costing significantly more than a year ago. This financial strain is taking a toll on mental health, as people grapple with the anxiety of unpaid bills and mounting debt. Food banks have become a lifeline for many, with usage hitting all-time highs. The crisis is also impacting small businesses, as consumers cut back on spending, leading to closures and job losses. Despite government efforts to provide relief, including energy subsidies and cost of living payments, the measures often fall short of addressing the scale of the problem. For millions, life in the UK has become a constant battle to stay afloat. 3. NHS Under Pressure. A system on the brink, the National Health Service, NHS, once a source of pride, is now in crisis. Years of underfunding, staff shortages, and increased demand have left the system struggling to provide even basic care. Waiting lists for surgeries and treatments have reached record highs, with some patients waiting months or even years for critical procedures. Staff morale is at an all-time low. Overworked nurses and doctors are leaving the profession in droves, citing burnout and poor pay. The pandemic only exacerbated these challenges, exposing deep flaws in the system. Even with recent pay raises, many healthcare professionals feel undervalued and unsupported. Patients are feeling the impact too. A&E departments are overwhelmed, with people waiting hours for urgent care. GP appointments are difficult to secure, leaving many turning to private healthcare, an option that's simply unaffordable for the majority. The government has pledged to reform the NHS, but progress is slow. Critics argue that more investment is needed to address immediate issues, rather than focusing solely on long-term strategies. As the backbone of the UK's healthcare system buckles under pressure, many are questioning its future. 4. Rising crime, a growing concern. Crime rates in the UK are climbing, leaving citizens feeling unsafe in their own communities. Knife and gun offenses have risen by 20% in the past year, with violent incidents making headlines daily. Urban areas like London and Manchester are particularly affected, but rural communities are not immune. Petty crimes like theft and vandalism are also on the rise, often fueled by economic hardships and social inequality. Police forces are stretched thin, struggling to keep up with the demand for their services. Budget cuts over the years have left law enforcement under-resourced and unable to address crime effectively. Beyond physical safety, cybercrime is another growing threat. Scammers and hackers are targeting vulnerable individuals, often draining life savings with sophisticated schemes. The lack of robust digital security measures has left many feeling exposed. While crime prevention is part of the government's agenda, critics argue that systemic issues like poverty, unemployment, and social disenfranchisement need to be addressed to make meaningful progress. Until then, the fear of crime continues to cast a shadow over daily life in the UK. 5. Transportation. Woes: expensive and inefficient. Getting around in the UK has become a headache for many. Public transportation, once a reliable option, is now plagued by high costs, delays, and cancellations. Train fares have risen by an average of 3.8% annually, making the UK one of the most expensive places in Europe to commute by rail. Road infrastructure isn't faring much better. Traffic congestion in cities like London, Birmingham, and Edinburgh costs commuters hours of lost time and fuel expenses. Meanwhile, potholes and poorly maintained roads are common complaints, particularly in rural areas. For those relying on buses, cuts to services in less populated areas have left many stranded without reliable transportation options. This lack of connectivity further isolates already struggling communities. The government has promised investment in greener and more efficient transportation, but progress is slow. Until then, the daily commute remains a costly and frustrating experience for millions. 6. Housing crisis. A dream out of reach, owning or renting a home in the UK has become increasingly unattainable. Property prices have soared to staggering levels, especially in major cities like London and Manchester. The average home now costs over £280,000, and first-time buyers need an income of at least £60,000 to even consider stepping onto the property ladder. For many, this dream remains far out of reach. Renting isn't much better. Monthly rents have skyrocketed, with Londoners paying an average of £2,500 per month for modest accommodations. Outside the capital, the situation is still dire, with rental increases outpacing wage growth. As a result, more people are being pushed into house shares or forced to move farther from their workplaces, enduring lengthy commutes to save on housing costs. The lack of affordable housing is compounded by a shortage of new homes being built. Government initiatives to increase housing stock often fall short, leaving vulnerable populations at risk of homelessness. Social housing waiting lists continue to grow, and temporary accommodations are stretched to capacity. The housing crisis is not just a financial issue, it's a social one. Families are struggling to find stable, long-term housing, and the stress of insecure living situations is taking a toll on mental health. Without immediate and significant reforms, the UK's housing market will continue to exclude more people from the basic right of having a home. 7. Immigration challenges. A divisive issue. Immigration remains one of the most contentious topics in the UK. Net migration reached over 700,000 in 2024, driven largely by non-EU nationals. While immigration contributes to the economy and fills critical labor shortages, particularly in the NHS and construction sectors, it has also led to public concerns about resources and integration. The rise in immigration has strained public services, including housing, healthcare, and education. Communities are struggling to accommodate the influx of newcomers, often leading to tensions and social friction. Critics argue that the government's policies, such as the points-based immigration system, fail to address these challenges effectively. Illegal immigration adds another layer of complexity. In 2024, thousands crossed the English Channel in small boats, highlighting gaps in border control. The government's attempts to curb these crossings, including controversial deportation plans, have faced legal and ethical pushback. Despite these challenges, immigrants have made invaluable contributions to the UK's culture and economy. Striking a balance between welcoming newcomers and ensuring adequate resources for all remains a delicate and highly debated task. 8. Education under strain, falling behind. The UK's education system, once a global benchmark, is now under immense pressure. Budget cuts, teacher shortages, and outdated curricula are leaving students unprepared for the challenges of a rapidly changing world. Schools in disadvantaged areas often lack the resources to provide a quality education, widening the gap between rich and poor communities. Higher education is no better. Tuition fees of up to £9,250 per year have burdened graduates with significant debt, with many questioning whether the return on investment is worth it. Universities are also struggling with funding, leading to larger class sizes and fewer support services for students. The pandemic exacerbated these issues, with months of online learning resulting in significant learning gaps. Teachers and parents are concerned that the system isn't doing enough to help students catch up. Without urgent intervention, the UK risks falling further behind on the global stage in terms of education standards. 9. Environmental concerns. The clock is ticking. The UK is facing a mounting environmental crisis. Climate change is causing more frequent and severe weather events, from floods in Yorkshire to heat waves in the south. Rising sea levels threaten coastal communities, while air pollution in cities like London poses serious health risks. Despite being one of the first countries to set a net-zero carbon emissions target, progress has been slow. Renewable energy initiatives are expanding, but reliance on fossil fuels persists. Recycling rates have plateaued, and single-use plastics remain a significant issue. Public transport, a potential solution to reducing emissions, is underutilized due to high costs and inefficiency. The government has made promises to improve green infrastructure, but critics argue that these measures are too little, too late. The environmental crisis is not just a future concern, it's a present one. Without swift and comprehensive action, the UK's ecosystems and communities will face irreversible damage. 10. Declining quality of life. A nation in decline. For many, living in the UK no longer feels like the experience it once was. A combination of economic, social, and political issues has led to a significant decline in quality of life. People are working longer hours for less pay, with little time or money left for leisure. Public services, once a hallmark of the UK, are now stretched thin. Roads are poorly maintained, libraries are closing, and community centers are disappearing. Mental health issues are on the rise as people grapple with stress, uncertainty, and a lack of support. This general sense of decline has left many feeling disillusioned and disconnected from their government. Trust in political leaders is at an all-time low, and the optimism that once defined British resilience has given way to cynicism and frustration. While there's hope for change, many feel that the UK has lost its way. 11. Employment and wage stagnation. Despite historically low unemployment rates, wage growth in the UK has stagnated, leaving many households struggling to keep up with the rising cost of living. While jobs may be available, they often fail to provide the financial security and upward mobility that previous generations enjoyed. This stagnation has been particularly hard-hitting in industries such as retail, hospitality, and care work, where wages have barely kept pace with inflation. One of the core issues is the rise of insecure employment, such as zero-hour contracts and gig economy jobs, which offer little stability or benefits. Workers in these roles frequently report difficulty securing enough hours to cover their basic expenses, let alone save for the future. Even full-time employees find themselves grappling with shrinking purchasing power as energy bills, housing costs, and grocery prices continue to climb. Additionally, the gap between wages in London and the rest of the country exacerbates regional inequalities. While some high-paying roles are concentrated in the capital, the majority of the UK's workforce faces stagnant wages and limited opportunities for advancement. This disparity has left many feeling trapped in a cycle of working hard but barely making ends meet. Moreover, wage stagnation is not just an economic problem, it's a societal one. It contributes to declining morale, increased mental health challenges, and reduced social mobility. For many, the prospect of owning a home, building savings, or enjoying a comfortable retirement feels increasingly out of reach.